Hello again, everybody. It's Takedown. Scott Casper. We continue to cover the sport of wrestling coast to coast, border to border, and to all the ships at sea. This time we head to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Michael Fessler is an author there, former wrestler, competed for some 16 years of his young life, and his journey into faith started around the same time he first stepped foot on the mat at 6 years old. He joins us now. Michael, how are you?
I'm good.
The book, Faith and Wrestling, How the Role of a Wrestler Mirrors the Christian Life. Draw the correlation for me. Why, in fact, does it mirror the role of a wrestler and a Christian? Why are those two so similar?
It's my belief uh, that the Christian faith is a faith of wrestlers. I draw a correlation between in the first chapter and the story with Jacob essentially wrestling with God and with uh, just the internal aspect there spiritually, and then with the various things in the world, just the evil that takes place. We're constantly wrestling internally and wrestling uh, with all the various aspects outside in our world.
There are some that question whether or not Jacob actually wrestled an angel of the Lord, but more to the truth, I think perhaps those people believed that he was wrestling with his conscience or his belief. What are your thoughts on that?
I do lean more towards sort of a allegory or metaphor
Hmm?
with that aspect. I, I, I don't believe that God appeared physically necessarily, but I think the concept stands that whatever the story is, or whether that was God Himself, angel of the Lord, whatever it was, the concept stands that Jacob was wrestling with God.
There are those who wrestle with truths, not just in the Bible, but as they walk through life. Jack Spates, for example, wrestled with the truth of it all as a young man, and now is able to fall to his knees and drink with the wisdom provided by the Bible and by his faith. What can you tell me about Jack Spates? Why does he endorse your book so heavily?
Jack Spates, in my opinion, is one of the most important people that was able to get this book bolstered and um, knowledge about the book known to people and helped me get it published. I had, when I was writing the book in the beginning stages, I'd watched a flow wrestling video, and the video was talking about how he was stepping down as the coach at Oklahoma to pursue ministry. And that towards the end of writing the manuscript, I shelved it several times. Um, but I remembered that video, and I thought maybe if I could get the manuscript of him, that he might find the material interesting, and perhaps even let me tell his story. And so I sent him an email, um, and a couple weeks went by, I didn't hear from him, and then I got a random phone call, and it was Jack Spates, and he loved what was in the book, and he wanted to be a part of it. So we Skyped interviewed pretty much the very next day after I talked to him on the phone, and ever since then, we've just been basically developing a friendship. We talk on a regular basis about faith, about wrestling, and about anything else in life. And he took this project and he sent it on to people around the country, specifically, Gene Davis and Rob Bronson both endorsed the book as well. They read the manuscript and loved it. So,
Published by Cross Books, we're talking with Michael Fessler, Biblical and Theological Studies major for Bethel University, Mass Communications as well, Concordia University in St. Paul. The book is called Faith and Wrestling, How the Role of a Wrestler Mirrors the Christian Life. And so many wrestlers end up believing that very thing, but they find it through trial and error. And my point is that many wrestlers will find that they have come to the top of the ladder. They're all by themselves and they can go no further. There's still two, three rungs left. each and every day, as a matter of fact, but 2 or 3 rungs left, and they can't do it alone. They realize that there's something more that they need, and that's when they generally turn, if they don't already have a relationship, but that's when they generally turn their life over to Christ or their higher power, a belief, if you will, faith and an understanding of Christianity. Would you say that's true? Is that a commonality? Is that what you're finding in your walkthrough?
I do. What's interesting is whether it's wrestling or anything else, when people reach the top in life and they think they've accomplished everything that they possibly could, there's always something missing there. And I mentioned in the book that part of the reason is sport, various aspects in life, the job, whatever it may be. That is not the end goal. There's something else that's driving us. There's something else that we're missing that we need to get in contact with. And I believe that that is the faith aspect.
So Brennan Manning once wrote, of if a random sampling of Americans were taken, let's say 1,000 of them, a majority would define faith as a belief in the existence of God. It's really so much more, isn't it?
It's absolutely so much more than that.
So let's define it. Faith and wrestling, if they are so important in the way of a wrestler in the search for a Christian life, how do you define faith in today's, let's just say it, in today's economy, time, money, family, all the pressures? How is faith defined by you?
By me, first and foremost, is defined by a relationship. Brennan Manning's quote that I mentioned in the book. The truth is, years ago, centuries ago, thousands of years ago, everybody believed in some sort of supreme being. It was just common knowledge back then. And even today, people may have some sort of idea that there is a supreme being of some kind. But that's as far as it goes. Faith goes beyond that, creates a relationship with whatever this supreme being is. And in my belief, and as espoused through the book, is that relationship is through the Christian faith, Christ. And yeah, it's a relationship first and foremost.
Okay, and I think that's what I was looking for. That the initiation of oneself into a faith, generally, if it's to be successful, and sometimes it takes a lifetime for it to be successful, needs to be one of full and total immersion. Agree or disagree?
Agree. Absolutely agree.
So
it should. When we have a relationship with anybody, that relationship is going to impact us and change us in many ways. Whether it's a marriage or a friendship or children, the relationship changes you.
So, and in life, and we'll take the corollary of wrestling, okay? Wrestling, life, relationship, faith. We find that as much as we believe, and we've been taught from very beginning, that it is all about us. We are the most important, or the center of the universe. The older we get, we begin to realize that is the furthest from the truth. It's not about you, is it?
It's not about us at all. No, we are special in the cosmos and God's created universe. We're very special, made in His image, but it's not about us. It's about Him.
What is it? Does our faith define us, or do we define our faith?
I believe our faith defines us.
No matter, let's say there are variations of Christianity, of course, different faiths and different studies, different endorsements. But when it all comes down to it, it's a search for the Creator, right? It's a search for a higher power, and at the end of the day, I think that struggle goes all the way to the end. is it fair to say, in order to be successful in your search, you must just fall to your knees and admit that you are fallible?
Absolutely. That's the beginning of the whole thing. The realization that we're not the center of the universe, that there's something greater than ourselves. The acknowledgement of the Creator is the first part of that transition. And the next part, as we've talked about, is embracing it in a relationship. To believe that the Supreme Being is not just some guy standing atop the universe who's distant from us, but that he actually wants a connection with us.
Particular chapter, we tend to idolize guys like Jay Robinson or Pat Santoro or Tom Brands or whoever, Cale Sanderson. We tend to idolize. There is a chapter in your book, perhaps chapter 3, that hit me hardest because I interview idols all the time.
Yeah.
In our sport, people who look at them and say, well, if I could only be as good as Dan Gable or, Tim McClellan or whoever. Your chapter 3, Transforming Wrestling from Idol to Icon. Can you dive into that chapter for me a little bit?
Absolutely. What I try and show in that chapter is that there's a big difference between an idol and an icon. We, as God's creation, were meant to be icons. Icons are things that point beyond themselves. So whenever someone looks at me, they should be reminded of something else. An idol, with an idol, all the thoughts, all the praise, the worship, it stays with that thing. And I think we often run into idolizing the sport of wrestling or the people in that sport rather than using it as a means as a gift almost. I believe wrestling as a gift is something to enjoy, something to embrace.
It's interesting in the sport of wrestling, we don't hear it as much as we do perhaps in football or basketball. When a reporter is on the sideline or on the field interviewing a player after a game, after a basketball game, football game, no matter what, a lot of times it will say, first and foremost, I want to give thanks to God, as if God was watching the game or cared about the outcome. There's a question in here, or perhaps a statement that says God wants us to compete. How do we know this? How do we know this, and how do we know He even cares about wanting us to compete?
Yeah, I think we find it true just in the fact that He is a personal being, and He loves seeing us enjoy gifts that He has given. Like I said, I believe wrestling is a gift. It's been given to us. It's something that we want to enjoy, and our enjoyment in that makes Him happy. When God gives gifts, or when anybody gives a gift, they want to see the person enjoy it. And by our enjoying it, I think God finds pleasure in that. That's why it's not so much a matter of who wins or loses. The matter is that we're playing.
To this day, Dan Gable still trains. To this day, I believe he still trains, and many others do, in their search for their faith or a definition of the ever-changing, their ever-changing definition of faith. I think that's probably my better understanding. But the same for wrestling. And that's where I draw the correlation. It's not so much the end result as it is whether or not you win or lose. It's the constant training of an athlete toward wrestling perfection, or a constant training of that athlete or person in their faith, in their search for faith, and their search for a better understanding. Is that in accordance with your writing, and is that in accordance with your belief?
Absolutely. I make a correlation about that, the training that takes place. Part of the mirror image of wrestling, early part of the Christian movement, there was this movement called the ascetic movement, which literally meant to train. Christians were those who trained themselves spiritually, physically, to embrace the battles that were before them spiritually on behalf of other people. With wrestling, you have to train. You have to devote everything um, in order to be successful in the sport. Uh, they correlate with one another.
Is wrestling and the human experience, does that go hand in hand more than we, even those of us in the sport, understand? I mean, it seems to me, as I continue to study the sport, as I continue to talk to those that, uh, for whatever reason, for example, you and I talking right now, having this discussion, but is wrestling and the human experience, is it one and the same?
It's I mean, pretty much what a wrestler experiences physically when he's wrestling his opponent. In my opinion, I think we experience some form of wrestling spiritually. Um, I mentioned in the chapter wrestling as an experience. Wrestling is a part of life. The obvious reality is that the world is not as it should be. And therefore, we're in a place where we have to wrestle with a bunch of issues on a micro level and a macro level. We are wrestling.
Does wrestling and the breaking down, in other words, if you wrestle enough, you're going to get tired.
Yeah.
Exposing yourself to intense emotional questioning as to whether or not you are good enough, whether or not you have enough. We talked about Terry Brands falling on his knees to accept, Jesus Christ into his life because he knew he couldn't get any better on his own. He would go no further without some higher power there to work with him, to guide him. He's very open in that declaration, by the way. But is wrestling? Uh, is it that partnership with God that, and I think you write about this, that makes us stronger, and is wrestling perhaps the snapshot that we need, as an example?
Yeah. So since we are wrestling in life, and just like when you're physically wrestling the match, you grow very, very tired to the point that you want to give up. The peace that Christ brings, that God brings, is a support piece. He walks through life with us. So when we do get completely tired, completely fatigued, and can't go any further, He is right there to lift us up.
Is the season the wrestling season? And you know the season I'm talking about, the basic high school or collegiate season, has a beginning. That's hope, right? The season, the practice, the season, that's meaning. The end of the season, the national championships, purpose. Yeah? Or have I simplified it a little too much?
For the hope, meaning, and purpose part,
Yeah.
um,
To each there is a
I,
season, right?
yeah, that's good.
I am by far not the guy that's going to be challenging anybody for a spot in any biblical or theological studies class, but that's how I see wrestling, and that's why your book to me was so engaging. And folks, we're talking with Michael Fessler, biblical and theological studies major from Bethel University, his communications degree as well from Concordia University in St. Paul. A very learned young man. His new book, Faith in Wrestling: How the Role of a Wrestler Mirrors the Christian Life. And we couldn't agree anymore. It's available through Cross Books. It's also available online, isn't it, Michael?
Absolutely.
Can you
Yep.
tell the people where they can get it?
Yeah, it's available Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, really any major book retailer. And there's, the typical soft cover book, and there's also an ebook available for those who like to use their Kindle or whatnot.
Now, in closing, I will explain to our listeners, if I can, and please jump in with me. You say every Christian is a wrestler, and wrestling itself contains a unique perspective in regard to Christian faith. While I agree with that, I think that also explains why wrestling, when allowed, becomes so popular around the world. Sergei Beloglazov just interviewed with us and talked about wrestling and its growth throughout Europe, Eastern Europe, South America, Jamaica, etc. Not just here in the States, but around the world. Wrestling is enjoying a renaissance, if you will, and perhaps we can see that because, of the times that we live in, the troubles that, the world is living with, and perhaps people are reaching out to be that Christian or to be that wrestler, if you will. And that's what I got from your book, Michael. Outstanding book. It's a page turner for sure. Anytime there's a book endorsed by my good friend Jack Spates, former head coach of Oklahoma University, I'm going to give it a good look, and by gosh, it didn't let me down. I appreciate you talking with me about it. Who would you like to recognize in your pursuit of this book and its finish?
Honestly, like I said in the beginning of the interview, Jack Spates was integral to everything. He really helped move the process forward, and I appreciate everything that he did. And then the other people that endorsed the book, I appreciate them as well. And the people I interviewed for the stories in the book, Jason Ness has been not only let me tell a story, but there's a promo video available for the book that he was a part of, and he kicked my butt on that. So he's been
good for
great.
You.
Yeah, when a wrestling dropout faces a national champion like Jason Ness, you're going to run into trouble. So I learned my lesson.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of guys in college wrestling and beyond I would never go on the mat without my microphone or a camera. I'll tell you that, because that's the only reason I would belong on that mat in the company of those men. Ness is a talented man with a very sincere and deep faith, and just a perfect example. Perfect example. Michael, I appreciate your time today. Great book. Best of luck to you. Keep us posted on it and let us know what your next book will be and when it comes out, will you?
I absolutely will.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's Michael Fessler, Faith and Wrestling, How the Role of a Wrestler Mirrors the Christian Life. I'm Scott Casper. You've been watching another special edition of Takedown.